Or what do we?
Yeah, that's good. I'll change it tomorrow, and I'll mail new ones out.
Yep, everything else is fine.
All right.
Hey, Lauren,
Yes.
do you have an extra agenda by chance?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the St. Tammany Parish Planning Commission meeting. Today is Tuesday, March 10th, 2015. Ms. Secretary, if you would please perform the roll call.
Ms. Casabon. Mr. Lauren. Mr. Richardson. Mr. Richard. Mr. Willie. Mr. Matthews. Mr. Davis. Mr. Doherty. Mr. Drum. Mr. Randolph. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, if you would, silence all cell phones and electronic devices. If there's any recommendation made by this commission that you do not agree with, appeals cards can be filled out to our right. If you wish to speak in front of the commission and to ensure that we have a record of all of those who did speak, we ask that you fill out a speaker's card, also available to our right. Each side will be given 10 minutes, either for or against, with a 5-minute rebuttal. And if you would, please exit the building at the end of each case if you wish to discuss it further, as if you go back into the lobby area, it does echo back into the chamber. At this time, I would ask Commissioner Randolph to have our invocation, followed by a Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Drum.
Gracious Father, once again we come to you and bow down heads, Lord, but to thank you for all the blessings you bestowed on our lives. Lord, you watched over and protected us all day long. And Lord, we thank you for that. We thank you for all the commissioners, Lord. We thank you for the citizens that we represent, this parish government that we serve as well. And we thank you for those that are interested in attending this meeting, all those that represent residents, citizens, and businesses, and help us to make the decisions that's in the best interest of all. In all these blessings we ask in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Given at the last planning meeting, the commission selected their chairman and vice chairman consistent with what we did in zoning. I am honored to have selected the chairman for planning. I would like to appoint Commissioner Matthews as the parliamentarian, and he is also the parliamentarian of zoning. Thank you. Consent calendar. Any items not pulled from the consent calendar are automatically dispensed by vote. Oh, excuse me. Thank you. In our packets are the February 10th minutes for your review. Do we have any motions?
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve, but I believe there's a correction that needs to be made. On page 6, I believe it was, of the minutes. Hang on a minute, let me find it again. Has to do with the amendment to the planning and zoning rules that we sent forward. On the minutes, it only references 18-036.00 items E and F, going from 100 days to 75 days. And I believe the motion also had included 18-051.00 items E and F, going from 100 to 75 days as well. I believe Mr. Lauren had made that motion, if I recall right. And I would move to approve with that correction.
As amended.
Thank you.
We have a motion by Mr. Dougherty, a second by Mr. Matthews to approve the minutes as amended. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I ask for a vote. Motion carries. Consent calendar. Any items not pulled from the consent calendar are automatically dispensed by vote as approved and/or as per staff comments. Items pulled from the consent calendar shall be discussed and voted upon individually. Staff,
Yes, sir. We'd like to pull the first case under minor subdivision, MS 15-02009. It requires a waiver.
Commission. Mr. Matthews?
I'd like to pull the remaining of the consent calendar, please.
Okay, all items will be pulled from the consent calendar. Entering parish right-of-way, servitudes and easements. Entering parish right-of-way, Magnolia Drive, Ward 1, District 1. Request to enter parish right-of-way for the purpose of gaining access to property. Debtor, Nicole and Robert Harris. Parish Council District Representative, the Honorable Marty Dean. Staff?
Yes, this is enter parish right-of-way to gain access to property. The original resolution, number 10-113, was approved back in December 2010. An extension was granted and approved November 12, 2013, and then the second extension was denied in May 2014. We've put together another resolution that outlines what the petitioners requested about a aggregate easement to their property, and we put that in the resolution.
Thank you. Would anyone from the public care to speak? If so, please approach the podium, state your name and address.
Yes, I'm Kyle Harris. That's our property there. We're building our house on it and ran into a couple of problems over the last couple of years trying to get the easement done and trying to get the wetlands permits and so forth. We ran into problems, but we have all of it ready to go. We're ready to start building as soon as we get our approval for the easement onto our property. And it's a single house into the property there.
Thank you.
So.
Is there anyone from the public who would also care to speak?
Thanks.
Seeing none, I close it to the public. I bring it back to the commission. Mr. Dougherty.
Yes, sir. On item 9, the petitioner agreed to post a warranty obligation upon completion of the project. It doesn't say how many dollars we're talking about.
What it would be for the aggregate, I don't really have that figure, but it would be that times the length of the roadway, which is 200 feet. That's usually established after the performance obligation has been granted back to the petitioner, and then we establish a warranty obligation. So off the top of my head, I think it's like $12 or $15 per aggregate per linear foot. So 200 times 15.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Matthews?
Move to approve.
We have a motion by Mr. Matthews, a second by Mr. Lauren to approve. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I ask for a vote. Motion carries. Entering parish right-of-way, Pine Street, Ward 4, District 5. Request to enter parish right-of-way for the purpose of laying and connecting water line. The debtor, Wadsworth LLC. Parish Council District Representative, the Honorable Marty Gould. Staff?
Yeah, this is just a inter-parish right-of-way for the purpose of laying and connecting an 8-inch water main pipe along Pine Street.
Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak? Seeing none, I close it to the public, I bring it to the commission. Mr. Matthews.
Yeah, I was looking at the plat, I guess it is, overhead. Are the dotted lines on here the indication of where the line would go?
Correct.
Okay. I can't follow it. It looks like there's one line going east and west and another line going roughly north and south. How does that work together?
Right, there's a match line. If you take the lower image, and there's a match line right in the border between the top image as well, and you can match it to the far left top image. There's a match line there, and it runs straight.
Okay. I don't see the match line. What is the match line? Where is that? Show me. Okay, and this. Okay, all right. Just couldn't figure that out.
Mr. Randolph.
Yes, to staff, when does the whole harmless agreement, when does that take place? At what point in time during the construction process?
That takes place prior to a work order being issued.
Okay.
Really, everything has to be met prior to the work order being issued, other than the as-built plans.
Thank you.
Mr. Matthews.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion by Mr. Matthews and a second by Mr. Davis. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Motion carries. Minor subdivisions, MS 15-02-009, a 3.68 acre parcel into parcels A and B, Ward 4, District 4. The owner, Daniel and Deanie Reese. The surveyor, LS Land Surveying LLC. Parish Council District Representative, the Honorable Reed Falconer. Staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This property is located at the far western end of Del Oaks Road near Del Oaks subdivision east of Madisonville. The parcels, the reason why we're having a public hearing for this minor subdivision is that the parcels do not meet the minimum road frontage requirements for an A3 zoning district. As I stated, the owner is proposing to create two parcels from one parent parcel at the end of the cul-de-sac, which is Del Oak Road. The parish code requires that lots within an A3 zoning district have a minimum 60-foot of road frontage on a cul-de-sac. However, based on the fact that both parcels are over 1 acre in size and widened to over 200 feet back off of the cul-de-sac frontage, the staff has no objection to the minor subdivision request. Since a waiver of the regulations are required in order to approve the minor subdivision request relative to the lot frontage issue, a two-thirds majority vote of the full membership of the commission is required in order to approve the waiver, which is 8 votes, pursuant to subdivision ordinance regulations 499, section 40-100, waiver of regulations.
Thank you. Anyone from the public care to speak? Seeing no one, I close it to the public. I bring it to the commission. Mr. Davis.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion.
With the waiver.
We have a motion by Mr. Davis with waiver, second by Mr. Richard. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I would ask for a vote. Motion carries by more than 2/3. MS 15-02-010, a 3.105 acre parcel into parcels 1, 2, and 3, Ward 9, District 12. The owner, Howard Fashon et al. The surveyor, J.V. Burks and Associates, Inc. Parish Council District Representative, the Honorable Jerry Binder. Staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reason, again, for a request for a review for a minor subdivision on the agenda is that one of the parcels is being accessed with a private driveway. The owner is proposing to create 3 parcels from one parent parcel, and since the private drive will only provide access to one parcel within the minor subdivision, said drive is not required to be built to a parish standard pursuant to Section 40-045.01 of Subdivision Ordinance 499. Therefore, the staff has no objection to the proposed minor subdivision request.
Thank you. Anyone from the public care to speak? Seeing no one, I close it to the public. I bring it back to the commission. Mr. Matthews.
Appears that there's nobody here to answer any questions.
Yes, sir, Mr. Matthews, the applicant is in the audience, he just didn't wish to speak. If you want to have him come up, he can come up and
Well, I
speak.
think that'd be good. Tell us what you're trying to do.
Mr. Vashon?
My name is Howard Fashion. I live at 104 Athene Drive, Slidell, Louisiana. This is a piece of property that was owned by my parents, and they're both deceased. So we're just subdividing, requesting a subdivision, a minor subdivision, so that we can divide the property among the children.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Motion to approve.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Matthews and a second by Mr. Randolph. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I ask for a vote. Motion carries. Petition requests, we have none. Entering the Tammany Trace, we have none. Revocations, closings, review. Revocation 14-12-002. Revocation of a portion of Algiers Street, Slidell, Louisiana, Ward 8, District 12. The applicant, Own Your Own LLC, Surveyor, J.V. Burks and Associates, Inc., Parish Council District Representative, the Honorable Jerry Binder. Postponed at the February 10th, 2015 meeting. Staff?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the petitioner is asked to postpone it one more month. It's my understanding they're getting real close to finding the owner of the property on the north side of the right-of-way Algiers Avenue, which is required as part of the application process. So we'd recommend it be postponed again till next month's meeting.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public which cares to speak on the recommendation of postponement? Seeing none, I close it to the public. I bring it to the commission. Mr. Dougherty.
I'd move to postpone to the April planning meeting.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Dougherty, a second by Mr. Randolph to postpone till the April meeting. Mr. Matthews.
Steph, this is the second time that they have asked to postpone it, so this doesn't reflect on our ability to postpone more than
That's correct.
twice. Okay.
Yes.
We have a motion and a second to postpone. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I ask for a vote. Motion for postponement passes. Re-subdivision review. RS 15-02-018. Town of Mandeville, Square 276, into lots 1 through 7, Ward 4, District 7. The petitioner, Bill Johnson. The surveyor, John G. Cummings and Associates, Inc. The owner, Maroney Bill Johnson. Parish Council District Representative, the Honorable Jacob Groby. Staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The owner is proposing to re-subdivide Square 276 into 7 lots, which requires a public hearing pursuant to code, since more than 5 lots are being created from a single parent parcel. The staff has no objections to the proposed re-subdivision request, since the owner is complying with all aspects of parish code relative to lot size, lot width, and is tying into community sewage and water facilities.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak? Seeing none, I close it to the public. I bring it to the commission. Mr. Dougherty.
Yes, sir. What are they gonna do with drainage on these 7 lots? I mean, you go from a large parcel to 7 lots, that's gonna increase the runoff.
Well, I mean, when they file for their individual permits, you know, the engineer department will review each permit and require the proper detention or whatever's required.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Davis?
Yeah, I think since it meets all the zoning qualifications, A4, and each lot is over 1/4 of an acre, I'll make a motion to approve.
I have a motion by Mr. Davis to approve, a second by Commissioner Lauren. Mr. Savant.
Mr. Keller, just one question on the survey plat that was provided. I see that Lot 3 has a back width, at least on this lot, of 72.62. Is that correct, or should that be 92?
It's a little curve there. If you look at the plat, you'll see a little indication with arrows of 19.34. You add those together, that you come up with that 90-foot minimum. You see what I'm saying?
72,
Yeah.
oh, so that would be 72 plus 19?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? We have a motion and a second to approve. Please vote. Motion carries. Dormant subdivision review, we have none. Tentative subdivision review, we have none. Preliminary subdivision review. SD 12-04-002 PIVB, North Park, Phase 4B, Ward 3, District 5. Developer owner, Greengate North Park LLC. The engineer, Deep South Design Group. Parish Council District Representative, the Honorable Marty Gould. This was postponed at the February 10th, 2015 meeting.
Mr.
Staff?
Manella?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to, the petitioner's representative, Mr. Shane, requested both the preliminary and final be heard at the same time, so basically the comments are roughly the same. So he would request they be joined together and heard.
Mr. Matthews?
I move that we hear the preliminary and the final together, but vote separately.
Mr. Matthews made a motion to combine the two in presentation. However, we will vote separately. That was seconded by Mr. Richard. Are there any further comments? Seeing none, please vote. Motion carries. Staff?
The preliminary plans and hydrologic study have been reviewed by this office, and an inspection was made of the site. It is recommended that preliminary submittal be approved subject to the following: subdivision plat comments, remove sidewalk from typical roadway section. Drainage comment, remove sidewalk from typical roadway section. Watershed comments, need copy of LDQ stormwater permit letter with agency interest number or notice of intent. Sewer and water comments, plans and specifications for the construction of the project's water distribution lines and sewage collection lines have not yet been approved by Department of Health and Hospitals as required. General comments, gravity drainage district number 5 approval is needed. No maintenance obligation is required since this is an extension of a private road. Mandatory developmental fees will be required when building permit is submitted in accordance with ordinance number 04-0990, since no public hearing was held prior to January 1st, 2005.
And any comments regarding the final review?
Oh, okay, yeah. No work has commenced at the site. Since the infrastructure has not been completed, the developer is requesting that a performance obligation be established for a period of 6 months. See engineer's estimate of probable cost dated 1/15/15 from the developer's engineer, Mr. Alex E. Williams, P.E., Deep South Design Groups. There's actually a revised cost estimate that came in today. I believe you all have a copy as well. Should the Planning Commission approve the request for final approval, a performance obligation will be required for the infrastructure in the amount of $648,644 for a period of 6 months. See attached estimate of probable cost. Once again, that's been revised. The staff has reviewed the engineer's cost estimate and agrees with the contents. Subdivision plats can be signed upon issuance of a work order. And also with this revised cost estimate, we also have no objections to that as well. No warranty obligation is required at this time and will be established upon completion of the infrastructure and release of the performance obligation. Since the developer has no end users, the mandatory developmental fees are not due prior to signing the subdivision plats, but are due upon building permit application. Department of Development Planning has no comments.
Thank you. Mr. Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. An Honorable Planning Commission, Jeff Shane of the Jones Fussell Law Firm in Covington. I represent the owner and developer, Greengate North Park LLC. This is the same parcel that you as a zoning commission rezoned in part from HC to PBC1 2 months ago, I believe. You'll remember that about 80% of the lot had been zoned PBC1 and about 15, 20, 25% of the lot had a highway commercial designation. You've made that recommendation and that zoning ordinance is now going through the parish system. I appreciate the courtesy of combining the preliminary and final matters in the same hearing and discussion, because I think it'll make it easier for me and hopefully make it easier for you. The simplicity of the request is that this is a one-lot phase, Lot 12, which is about 5.1 acres. The prospect that we hope will buy and develop this lot is going to place tens of millions of dollar investment or improvement on this property. So it's a multi-$10 million improvement. There will be a need to have the infrastructure, the extension of the road, the extension of the sewer and the water, and the detention pond put in at the same time the improvements are being built by the prospective owner of the site. So rather than going through a sequencing of having my client, Greengate North Park, extend the road, put in sewer and water, extend other utilities, put in the detention, then come back, get final subdivision approval, we would respectfully request the opportunity to have those very same things occur, but occur contemporaneously with the purchaser of the lot, assuming it procures a building permit, meets all of parish code and standards. It would then, of course, commence construction of the project. That obviously is going to save time and efficiency, and we think ensure that we have an opportunity to get what we think is a very good business prospect, not just for my client, but for St. Tammany Parish into North Park. In particular, with regard to the preliminary subdivision staff analysis comments, under item 2, subdivision plat comments, that removal of the sidewalk has been deleted from the plat and resubmitted either yesterday or today. I doubt that staff's had a chance to look at it. The same thing under the drainage comments. With regard to the LDEQ stormwater permit, we're waiting for that permit to come to us from LDEQ. Same thing with sewer and water comments. We're waiting for approval from DHH. And we have already submitted our plans to Gravity Drainage District number 5. They're being reviewed. So we understand that we will not be able to proceed with that work until, in fact, those approvals have been procured, submitted to staff, and staff is comfortable with those things. As it relates to the final subdivision comments, the only comment of significance, and it's really why we postponed this case last month. You may remember it was postponed a month. Initially, the pond was sized considerably larger than it needed to be for Lot 12, and as a result of working with the prospective purchaser and their site plan, we were able to shrink the pond in size. Last month at this time, we didn't know to what extent we would shrink the pond. We now know to what extent we need to shrink the pond, hence the letter that I've given to you this evening. The pond still meets and actually exceeds the detention requirements for the proposed site plan on this parcel. But what that does do is it reduces the amount of performance bond that is needed in order to complete all of the infrastructure. So again, we have the amended letter from Deep South. So what we would ask you to consider is granting by separate motion preliminary subdivision approval subject to your staff comments and everything that's outstanding being submitted and approved by your staff, and also granting final subdivision approval, again, subject to not only the comments of staff, but the amending letter of March 10th of Deep South Design Group, which recommends that the bond be $630,119. With that having been said, if any of you have questions now or at the appropriate time, I'll be glad to address them.
Thank you, Mr. Shane. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak? Seeing none, I close it to the public. I bring it back to the commission. Mr. Davis. Oh, excuse me. Yes.
Engineering's already about the retention size. It does meet all the requirements?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's already been approved by, okay. I think in this case here, I mean, it's one lot. What happens if the person that you're intending on purchasing this lot bails out of this? Does that mean you'll have to come back to us? And if you want to develop anyway, so you're trying to get this just for one person, basically, or one company or stuff, or you're...
No, sir. We will be obligated to go forward when we procure our work order. We're going to put a performance bond up to give you an assurance that obviously the work's going to be done. I guess if for some reason the project did not go forward, we might not go forward with the extension of infrastructure, but there'd be no harm to the public. Everything would be in place so that if we procured, or I should say if we executed the work order and began the extension of the infrastructure, the parish has an assurance that if for some reason the developer didn't finish it, there'd be a performance bond to ensure that it could be completed.
Right. I know in the past we've had these very rarely we would go all the way from preliminary to final and stuff like this. But in this instance here, with only having one lot, I think that does take something into consideration.
Mr. Lauren?
It's kind of building on what Mr. Davis was talking about. Item 6 says there's no end user. I don't have a problem with the preliminary at all. It's the idea of the best laid plans of mice and men sometimes go astray. And you only have to look over at Colonial Pinnacle and take a look at those buildings that have just been sitting there for almost 5 years now,
We don't need to know that.
to see that things sometimes don't always go the way they're planned. And that's my concern when you grant final approval before anything's done.
Well, let me address that. First of all, the extension of the road and the infrastructure is in conformity with the tentative subdivision approval that this commission has previously granted. Now, rather than doing a more traditional phase, if you will, which typically would be multiple lots, granted it's only one lot. But I do not think a situation, for example, of a building being built but no infrastructure can occur because, again, the work order and performance bond will be here. Perhaps the worst that could happen would be if the developer decided to extend the infrastructure and the prospect did not take title and/or build. It would be no different if we went ahead and decided to do Phase 4B now and went through the preliminary process, got a work order, built the improvements, came back to you, asked your staff to report to you whether or not they thought that we had completed the improvements in accordance with plans and specs. So I don't think that the general public or the parish should be at risk under this situation. And it's interesting, but we do have, the commission and the parish does have a history of these types of approval. Some of you were, I'm looking at some faces, some of you were on the commission years ago when across 190, that is precisely how the developer developed the Home Depot, then Albertson grocery store project. At that point, we had two big box prospects, if you will, that if they came, did not want to wait and allow infrastructure to be extended for 6 months before they could put a shovel in the ground. We have a very similar situation here, that we have a prospect that would like to put a shovel in the ground at the same time the developer is extending the infrastructure. So hopefully that's a good explanation.
Mr. Matthews?
Jeff, do you all have an agreement with this prospect?
Yes, sir.
I mean, it's a written contract.
Absolutely.
Okay. Staff and I guess legal counsel, what happens if, for instance, your prospect gets out of your contract? We have given final approval to a subdivision that has no infrastructure. What's the worst that could happen to us?
Final plats won't be recorded until we obtain the performance bond. So if the potential purchaser of that lot decides to pull out, we'd still have that performance bond in the Department of Finance that we could essentially call, or the developer would need to finish the infrastructure to match the recorded plat.
What happens if they provide the performance bond and years go by? Doesn't the performance bond have a terminus? No? No
It
terminus?
does have, no, it
Yes,
does have a
it's 6
term.
months.
6 months.
Okay, and after 6 months, they haven't done anything, what do we do?
Well, we definitely try to work with the developer to see where they're at and what they want to do, but, I mean, worst comes to worst, the parish can call the performance bond and then hire a contractor to finish off the infrastructure according to these designs
Do
that
we
you're
believe we
approving.
can do everything that's required for the $630,000?
Yes, it seems very feasible that you can.
I know in the past, a lot of these performance bonds have been very low, that we could not clearly have done it. That's why we couldn't call the performance bond. Although we legally could, it would have been crazy to do it since there wasn't enough money. But you all believe that the worst happens and the owner just bails out as their client does. For $630,000, we could put in the pond and the road and everything that's needed to be done.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Davis?
No, I'll wait to make a motion.
Mr. Richard?
Thank you. I think I'm going to do the same thing you were going to do. Obviously, interested in economic development, I propose that we approve both the preliminary and the final, and we'll do so within a single motion, first on the preliminary.
Mr. Lauren?
We do it, should we say it as amended to reflect?
That's the second one, is it not?
Yes, that's,
The letter applies to the second.
that
To the final.
that applies to the final, yes. But thank you, Mr. Lauren, for that reminder. So we have a motion by Mr. Richard, a second by Mr. Davis on SD 12-04-002 PIVB. No further comments? Please vote. Motion carries. We also have a motion by Mr. Richard and a second by Mr. Davis regarding final subdivision review, SD 12-04-002 FIVB as amended. Any further comments? Seeing none, I ask for a vote. Motion carries. Thank you. SD 07-04-009P, Tentella Ranch, Ward 1, District 3, developer owner Bruno Brothers Real Estate Management and Development, engineer Aero Engineering and Construction, Parish Council District Representative, the Honorable James Red Thompson. This developer is requesting a name change to Magnolia Mound. See under Old Business. Developer requests postponement until the next meeting. Staff?
Yeah, we have no objection to the request to postpone until next meeting.
Is there anyone in the public who wishes to comment on the recommendation to postpone? Seeing none, I close it to the public. I bring it back to the commission. Mr. Lauren?
Mr. Chairman, I know for a fact that the word got out that the developer was going to request a postponement on this. And so an email was sent out to the community, people that would have otherwise been here, thinking that it was going to be postponed. So that's one reason why there's no one here.
Mr. Dougherty?
I move to postpone SD 07-04-009P until the April meeting.
We have a motion by Mr. Dougherty, a second by Mr. Matthews to postpone until our April meeting. Is there any further comment? Seeing none, I ask for a vote. Motion for postponement carries. SD 14-12-006P, Beatico Creek, Parcel 11, Ward 1, District 1. Developer owner, Beatico Creek Preserve LLC. Engineer, Kelly McHugh and Associates, Inc. Parish Council District Representative, the Honorable Marty Dean. Staff.
The preliminary plans and hydrologic studies have been reviewed by this office and an inspection was made of the site. It is recommended that preliminary submittal be approved subject to the following. Comments A through D have been okayed. Sewer and water, submit one set of plans to DHH permit application to Tammany Utilities for review. Plans and specifications for the construction of the project's water distribution lines and sewage collection lines have not yet been approved by Department of Health and Hospitals as required. No work order will be issued until the submitted plans and specifications are approved by the DHH. Comments H and I are okay. No maintenance obligation is required since this is a private subdivision. No mandatory developmental fee is required at final submittal in accordance with ordinance number 04-0990 since a public hearing was held prior to January 1st, 2005. Department of Development and Planning does have comments.
Thank you. A waiver of the maximum cul-de-sac length of 700 feet will be required for Cypress Bend and Lost Lakes lanes, which requires a 2/3 majority vote of the membership, which is 8 members, in order to pass pursuant to parish code.
Thank you. Mr. Marone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Maroon on behalf of Beatico Creek Preserve LLC. As staff just noted, I think we've addressed all of the comments that we had coming into preliminary for this parcel 11. The only outstanding items are sewer and water, which is the submittal of the plans to Tammany Utilities, which Mr. McHugh's office is in the process of making that submittal, and we hope to have DHH approval so that we can comply with items F and G under that section. This was the parcel that you may recall we amended the PUD before you as the Zoning Commission at last month's meeting. We made some very minor changes. This plan is in conformity with those changes. There is, obviously we're tying into the existing sewer and water. We are also tying into existing lakes and detention ponds which are already constructed, so we don't have any new ponds in this section. With that said, we would respectfully request your approval of preliminary for parcel 11. I'll be happy to answer any questions that any of the commissioners may have.
Thank you, Mr. Marone. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak? Seeing none, I close it to the public. I bring it to the commission. Mr. Randolph.
Yeah, motion to approve?
A motion by Mr. Randolph, a second by Mr. Lauren to approve.
One question.
Mr. Matthews.
Planning had some comments, and quite frankly, I didn't see them on what I had in my packet. Would you tell me what those were? And
Well, yeah,
again,
the two cul-de-sacs that I mentioned, Parish code requires a 700-foot maximum length. They're slightly longer than that. They're not that much longer, but they are that longer. We don't have any issues with it because they're close to the 700-foot, and based on the design of the project, we don't have any real issues with that.
Okay, but we have to.
Technically, you have to
have
grant a waiver, that's correct.
Okay, that was
Right.
what I needed to talk about. And Paul, there's no way you can cut those culverts back to meet or anything like that?
The cul-de-sacs?
Yeah.
Well, no, there's really not any way to do that and to keep the plan as it's currently laid out.
Okay, so we have to do the waiver if this is going to go forward.
Yes, we would request the waiver.
I move to amend the motion to include the waiver of the cul-de-sacs.
We have a motion by Mr.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Matthews and a second by Mr. Randolph to amend the main motion. Are there any further comments?
I got a question.
Mr. Willie?
Paul, on the drainage, that drainage servitude around the green space,
Yes, the 10-foot servitude?
most of it goes out into that conservatory area. But on the west side, it goes, I guess, to that existing lake, but I don't see no drainage servitude across those lots.
Yes, if you, let me get to the drainage plan and make sure I'm telling you correctly.
They're on the, I think it's parcel 9. They're just not shown on this lot, on this plan, but they are there from previous phase.
Oh, it goes into.
The ones that's for the subsurface,
It must be subsurface across that Alderman Park.
it's got the dark line running across it? Yeah, the subsurface.
Okay, there is some drainage servitude over there.
Yes, sir. It's just on
It's not showing
parcel
it on this
9.
face, okay.
It does. It actually gets into the right-of-way and then comes down and goes subsurface where it makes its way into the pond.
Okay.
Mr. Willie, any further questions? Nope. All right, we're actually going to have two motions. The first motion is to amend the main motion to grant a waiver of the culverts made by Mr. Matthews and second by Mr. Randolph. Cul-de-sacs, excuse me, cul-de-sacs. Please vote. The motion carries. We now have a motion to approve made by Mr. Randolph, second by Mr. Lauren. Please vote. Motion carries. Thank you. Under old business, we have SD 07-04-009P. Council, I believe we voted on this previously, whereby the developer requested a name change.
Mr. Chairman, if the board wishes, or if the commission desires, excuse me, they can still take up this issue because it just involving a name change, which they want to do, which doesn't really affect the case itself, other than the fact that they want to change the name to Magnolia Mound. So you could take action on this if you'd like, or you can wait and hear it at the time we hear the preliminary.
So this specifically just applies to the name change?
That's correct.
Okay, then we will put that in and bring it to the commission. Then under old business, SD 07-04-009P, Tentella Ranch, Ward 1, District 3, developer owner Bruno Brothers Real Estate Management and Development, engineer Aero Engineering and Construction, Parish Council District Representative, the Honorable James Reed Thompson. The developer is requesting a name change to Magnolia Mound. Staff, any further comments?
No, sir. We've done this many, many times in the past. It's just a name change. We've checked our records. There is no other subdivision with this name, so we have no issues with it.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment? Seeing none, I close it to the public. I bring it back to the commission. Mr. Lauren.
Yes, I've received some emails earlier this week from some of the constituents up in that area on the one that we tabled earlier about Tentilla Ranch. And they were under the impression that it was all gonna be tabled, so they didn't come. I don't think they'll have a problem with it, but I think I would feel more comfortable if we waited until next week when they were here, or next month when they were here. We'd do it all at the same time. I don't think it would hurt them to
So you would like to make a motion to postpone?
make a motion to postpone.
Until April?
Yes, sir.
We have a motion by Mr. Lauren and a second by Mr. Willie to postpone until April. Counsel, do you have any comment?
No, thank you, Mr. Manella. I just was going to repeat what Mr. Lauren just said. Just because Mr. Keller may not have a problem with the name change doesn't mean that perhaps somebody else who wanted to come might want to comment on that.
Thank you. Mr. Lauren, do you have further comments?
No, sir.
Okay.
And I live right there.
We have a motion by Mr. Lauren and a second by Mr. Willie to postpone until April. Are there any further comments? Seeing none, I ask for a vote.
Then they should just call it Indian Mound.
The motion for postponement passes. Ruel Court, Ward 1, District 1, Parish Council District Representative, the Honorable Marty Dean. Developer is requesting an extension of time to acquire a work order. Staff?
Yeah, this is just an extension of a previously approved preliminary approval that was granted back in March of last year, I believe it was. The Department of Engineering has no objection to the extension of time. This would be solely up to the governing authority as outlined in section 40-061.04, which would be the commissioners.
Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak? Seeing none, I close it to the public. I bring it back to the commission. Mr. Matthews.
It'd be nice to know why they're asking for this extension, and again, there's nobody here to answer a question. I don't like voting for things like this when we don't know what is really the reasons for it. I would move to deny.
We have a motion by Mr. Matthews to deny.
Could this be postponed?
Can it be? Certainly, but right now we have a motion by Mr. Matthews
I'll
to deny.
withdraw my motion to deny and make a motion to postpone.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Matthews to postpone, a second by Mr. Dougherty. Mr. Davis.
On that motion, can it be amended to say that the developer be here to at least explain something to us? I mean, we've done this before in the past, and it just gets a little bit tedious when we don't know why we keep, granting these extensions all the time.
Right. I believe as the motion, we can make the motion to postpone. However, you can make a comment and ask staff to please advise the petitioner to be present at the next meeting. However, we
Okay.
can't
That's-
qualify the
Can
postponement.
staff do that, please?
I believe we can do that.
All right, thank you.
So we have a motion by Mr. Matthews and a second by Mr. Dougherty to postpone until the April meeting, and staff will contact the petitioner and ask for them to be present. Any further comments? I ask for a vote. Motion for postponement passes. Is there any other new business to come before this commission?
Yes, I have one. I'm probably risking my job by doing this, but I just want y'all to know that Ron celebrated a milestone birthday yesterday, even though he doesn't want anybody to know it. So y'all wish Ron a happy birthday.
Thank you, I'm 39, thank you.
Happy birthday.
You look 60.
Happy birthday. 39 again.
That's right.
Very
There
old
was
business.
there was a purpose to that.
Was that a misrepresentation? That's not nice.
Just saying.
Any
Don't
other?
fire me, Ron.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? If not, I have a motion to adjourn. So moved, seconded? Thank you.